Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at one of my images and hopefully I can give you some insight into how I made it. Thanks for watching. So this is the second time that I've made this painting. The first time I recorded for about 3 hours and it only recorded the sound. So somehow my settings got messed up, so I just decided to repaint it. I changed the character around a little bit so I didn't feel like I was painting the exact same thing. But in essence, it's really a similar character. You know, green skin, red, feathery type, petaled hair. Yeah, just kind of the face has changed a little bit. If you watch some of my other paintings, quite a lot of them, I use the lasso tool a lot, especially when I'm blocking in the character. But this time around, I just took some brushes and started going at it. I'm just kind of being messy right here, just throwing the colors in. You're going to see me spend a lot of time on this eye right here because I made a decision early on that I'm going to blur out most of the image, but I'm going to have a focal point on this eye and a little bit of the shoulder and the arm. So I do spend a lot of time on the eye. Not so much on the other eye. I get the other eye halfway decent, but as I said before, it's going to be blurred out anyway. If you look at the white of this eye, there's a very light hint of green that is in the shadow, but when your eye's white, it's going to pick up some of your skin tone. So in this case, the skin tone is green, so that's what I'm doing here, placing that green into the eye a little bit. Here, just kind of working around the eye. I gave the eye a little bit extra, you know, kind of interesting shapes. That's why the yellow is in there and the red and everything. Like I said, it's going to be a focal point, so I didn't want it to be boring or anything, just be simply an eye. With the eye, as you could see, I was using a combination of a brush as well as the smudge tool to smooth out the eye. Some parts of this image are a bit rougher than other parts, but I did make the eye a little bit smoother. And now I'm just going to be jumping around to different areas of the painting to just begin working on it. And that's what I do with a lot of my paintings. I just jump around. And here I'm using a few different brushes to just kind of bring out some texture. And you'll see something new that I do try in this painting that I really haven't done in any other painting, and that's create a skin texture before I even place it on the skin. But you can already see that there's a little bit of texture on the face from the texture brushes that I was using. And this brush that I'm using right here is also a texture brush. This one and the other one that I was using are brushes that have texture inside of them. And right there I was using a combination of that brush and smoothing it out, because I know I'm going to be coming back to it for more texture on the skin anyway. So yeah, just really kind of working the painting, working the face, trying to get the shape, the three-dimensional shape that I'm looking for. And here you'll see I start working that other eye, but I don't spend a lot of time on it. This is a new brush that I haven't used yet in the painting, and it's got a lot of noise in it, so it creates little dimples, I guess you might say, that helps skin. And the thing about skin is, you know, just like with a painting, it builds on itself. So even though you don't think that you see what you've put down, you see through it, and that's what really gives it that three-dimensional look. As with anything in your painting, if you want a three-dimensional look, you just build it until you get what you want. And it's the same with the skin. You're building texture to create that bit of that realistic look. With these, this was kind of the idea of these. The hair was like sort of feathers and sort of petals, and I even give them a little bit of fur towards the end. But here's what I was talking about as far as making a skin. Some people use photo textures, but I wanted to try something different. I thought I could make a little bit of a texture on my own, and then use that texture. So I go through a few different brushes here, some dark tones, some light tones. I think this is a multiply layer that I'm doing right here. That way it gets a little bit darker. And the whole reason for it is to create varied dimples. Some light, some dark. And eventually when I'm done with the brushes, I will go over to image and exposure. And I mess around with the exposure as well as the opacity of the layer itself. This is more like a skin brush that gives you that skin dimples. And I'll even use a textured brush to erase some of the paint strokes that I've put down. Yeah, you'll see that I use both my tool presets and my brushes. I want to eventually get all my brushes on my brushes, but I spent a lot of time using tool presets for a while, and now I'm doing more brush stuff. So I've been lazy and I have not combined the two yet. So hopefully eventually I'll do that. But here's our finished skin, I guess you might say. I double it. I drop the opacity for one of them, and this is where I go into exposure. And I'm just trying to boost the texture itself. So those dark and the highlighted areas kind of go back and forth towards each other. I'm messing with the hue here to shift it more towards that green tone of the skin. I place it over top of the fairy, and then I just use my warp tool and I'm warping it around. And this is not all that I do with the skin. I go over top of the skin beyond this. This is just giving me a base. You throw down your main colors, and now I'm giving myself a base. Will I use this technique every time? Probably not. But that's the thing about painting, is I like to experiment and I like to try different things and see how it's going to work out. Did it work out pretty well? Yeah, I had no problem with it. You can kind of see that the skin looks pretty good, and just like I said, it just gives me that base to build even more texture onto the skin. Working back with the feathers and the background. I work with the background a little bit later on. It's going to be blurred out too, but this is just, once again, building, add a little bit of something, and then I build on top of the background. Even though it's going to be blurred out, it needs something more than what it looks like right now. Going back to my focal point, you'll see this highlight. It has little lines in it, and that's supposed to be the shadows that the eyelashes cast. Smudge that out right there, and even add some lines in there. Maybe hard to see, but it's like anything else. You're just building in order to get that more of a realistic type of feel to it. Adding some eyelashes, back to the nose. And to me, this is, aside from the eye, the rest of the painting's pretty horrendous right now. It's ugly, but that's how every one of my paintings go, and I know a lot of artists that say the same thing. You go through an ugly phase, and you just have to keep working to get through it. So this is kind of where I'm at right here. I'm happy with the basic eye shape, but the rest of it's not there yet. So you just keep working. This is another brush. I'm trying to get some texture into those feather petals, I guess you call them. And like I said, they're going to be blurred out, but they still need variation of color, variation of texture. That way it looks pretty good. And just kind of bouncing around here. I think I'll go to my smudge tool every now and then to smooth stuff out that I think is a little bit too rough. Change the body shape, didn't like that. And see, here we go again with the skin. I mess with the skin, I go back and forth with the skin, adding more and more texture to kind of create something that I like. Even with the highlighting to help three-dimensionalize it there. and I want something different of the nose. I didn't want a perfectly smooth nose. I wanted, you know, a little bit of wrinkles there, so just adding those in. And really, right now, no tricks of the trade. Just kind of working the painting. That might be a little trick. I lassoed the nose, made it into a new layer, and then warped it to see if I liked it any. Texture again of the skin. A lot of cracks. You'll see me though. It erases a lot of it, but it's that little hint of texture that you're constantly trying to put in to create that realism. And here, giving her a little bit of camouflage because Fairy's going to need to blend into her background, because how often do you see a fairy? So you want her to be able to really kind of merge in with her surroundings. Working that eye on the other side a little bit. Here's where I try to figure out some lighting. I eventually land on some dappled lighting, but I like using adjustment layers a lot, but here they don't seem to be working for me, so I pretty much throw those away and don't use those. I used an adjustment layer there to darken it, and then I erase some of that dark out of it, so I'm getting more of a lightened area. So it's just, once again, three-dimensionalizing, darkening one side of her, and then lightening the other where light's going to be. I use that same brush that I used on the skin to try to get some of the eye in there. Some little cracks in the eye, because if you look really close at an eye, it's not perfect. So, and even when you look far away, it looks smooth, but it's all those little things that add up. Here I'm giving a little bit of a secondary light source that eventually will be put in. And this helps to make her pop off of the background as well. There's that blue light, and I try to make it kind of magical. And here I'm going to do something else with the skin, so I decide to go ahead and make a different brush. It's kind of like a freckly brush. I do have a freckle brush, but I wanted something that looked a little bit different, so I just decided to make one. I save the look of the brush, and then once you save that, you can dive in and start changing the settings of the brush. And once you've done that, then you pretty much just save the brush again. Once you figure out what you like, that's it. What I wanted to do with her skin here is, the idea was kind of like a miniaturized version of a field of flowers, I guess you might say. It comes out looking kind of scaly, a scaly tone, but that was kind of the idea, is, you know, just that whole nature thing. She's green like grass, and then I wanted to add some other little things. That way it kind of did, it had that, you know, her face was like a small field of flowers. But I used that brush, I put it in, I erased some, changed the hue, erased some, and that's really all I did there. And I added a little bit on her shoulder as well, because that's going to be a little bit in focus. But I thought the skin came out pretty cool. Something I don't really see on a lot of people's characters, so I thought that was pretty neat. A little bit more brighter bounce light. I go into the hair again to try to add a little bit more texture. A lot of this just kind of is thrown into the wind because I do blur it out, but I do think it adds anyway. And this is where that fur comes in. I was talking about it. This is a custom brush I made to add some fur. And I just kind of bring it around those feathery petals. And this is where I kind of go back to the dappled lighting. I make a color dodge layer on this, and I'm painting on a color dodge layer that's painted totally black. So this is a cool little trick to do. And I just went around and got my dappled light. Going back into the background, added some foliage brushes, but I blur them out, but you can see that it does a lot. It helped the background quite a bit. And then I'm going to darken around her face. I open up another window so I can see what she looks like in just value range, and I think it looks a lot better. when you darken up, because she has that light side of her face. Makes it pop out from the background. I duplicated her and then I blurred that, and then I basically put a mask on it and erased it out. So I was erasing out the blur so I could really kind of control the erasing. If I messed up, I could bring the blur back in. Right here, I'm doing what some people do. They use photographs for texture, and I'm making my own. This is like, I'm going back and forth between, I think, normal and multiply modes, and I'm erasing with a texture brush, and I'm using different texture brushes, and then I end up going back into that exposure and the opacity as well. Just something to add a little bit of texture to the image itself. I erase a lot of it out, but once again, it's one of those things that just kind of builds a little bit of texture. And that's about it for the whole image. I hope this gave you guys a little bit of insight into how I do some of my paintings. As I said, I don't do every painting the same, but you know, hopefully that works. If you guys want to support me, I have a Patreon page. I'd appreciate that. And I also have a Gumroad shop. And don't forget to subscribe here. If you guys have any questions, put them down below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks.